This is Vincent Eirene in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this coming month is the 10th anniversary of Blast Furnace Radio, the only internet radio station.
The only one, the only one ever?
The first. Yeah, Al Gore invented the internet, and I invented the... About 10 years ago, I heard from a friend of mine who knows a lot about computers, Lenny Flatley, that you could start a radio station on the internet. And of course, when we were kids, that's all we would dream about, having your own radio station. And it took us a while to figure it out. It was a lot of DOS commands and all setting the INI and all this real complicated stuff. And it really didn't work because it was over a 56K modem. It didn't work till DSL came in. And we started a radio station in April 10 years ago, in the year 2000. And when I told the media that in fact we were having starting an internet radio station, they came over for hours and hours and hours and asking questions and looking at it. And we had it in the basement with our famous Remco turntable, and they sat down there in spite of the kitty litter and learned about this new media.
Were they impressed?
They were, because it worked. I mean, it just, back then it seemed like magic that you could have a radio station over the internet, and now there's tens of thousands of stations.
Right.
And when you tell people that you have an internet radio station, they don't seem excited. They seem, just blasé. But having a radio station, I didn't realize that by having this 233 computer kicking out this music and content, that I was a radio journalist. And so there has been a very rich history of traveling to 11 different cities throughout the world, helping with emergency broadcast systems, where you have a web radio station for just during the time of the globalization conference. We were able to come in, set it up, broadcast, and then tear it down just in and out like a guerrilla video gang. And when we had it for the first time in the year 2000 in Philadelphia at the RNC, we had Jill Biafra and different people come in, and it was a very rich mix of people that I have been in contact with ever since. At the time, radio stations did not have a internet radio station to complement their broadcast, and now everybody does. Mm-hmm. In fact, when Amy Goodman and them were locked out of their workspace before 9/11, we helped them with their web broadcasting. That has since advanced to the point where you could point your phone and press an app, and you're on the internet, whether audio and video or audio.
Right.
In spite of having all these technological advances of podcast and digital recording and this, that, and the other, it really is comes down to whether you have any good content or not. We got an email from the Independent Media Center in Philadelphia asking us to come and set up the radio station, and when we showed up and they saw how old we were, that we were not 22 years old in 20 minutes, then the fighting began. And people just were challenging us, why are you here and what are you doing? And we kept on saying the same thing over again. You need to leave us alone, because we're trying to turn this computer into a broadcast box. And that's the fight we had all over the country. It's hard, but it's not impossible. But we had to get on the network and do all these different settings that now are double click. In spite of the fact that we weren't 19 years old, that we threw it together, and it was a very real part of the whole uprising against globalization, because we could be there and flip open our cell phones and that would come back to the studio. The phone interface would send out whatever was on the cell phone to the World Wide Web. And so we could be right in the middle of the riots and be broadcasting. And it was later on that both NPR and Free Speech Radio and Democracy Now! Told their people that that was their method. They were supposed to go out and to use their cell phones to get the live news back to the studio. Of course, it was really funny to see the NPR people, being chased around with billy clubs. They did not like this, new form of being the man on the scene. With the internet radio, you have to be at all cost on 24/7.
So you're broadcasting right now?
Nope, my friend's moving a server from one house to another in Salt Lake City. So that's another rule meant to be broken. I put a little thing out on the internet that said, journalistic delegation to Baghdad. And that's all there was. There was nothing else. There was that one email. And I got calls from all over the country. I got a call from Naomi Klein, and she's there. Did I miss the deadline? I said, yeah, Naomi, just stand in line. Just call me back next week. And of course, that was just a point of humor because there was no line to stand in. There was no money. There was no supporting group. There was no supporting group within Baghdad. And within a year, there was the money for us to travel over there. 8 of us, professors at universities, editors of newspapers, the editor of the Middle Eastern Journal, Naomi Klein, and we went over there for the first anniversary of Baghdad. I went over there with my $31 Radio Shack computer. I'm sorry, Radio Shack cassette tape recorder, and because of the sun and the sand, the non-moving parts digital recorders didn't work. So the kids go, what do we do now? I said, well, you could use this. And they go, what's that? I said, this. This is a cassette tape. And it was really interesting to go be in Baghdad for 8 days during the war. And some government somewhere was bombing all these buildings to scare people away from going to the protest, because the protest would have been enormous, but people were so scared to even go out into the streets because of the bombing of hotels all over Baghdad while we were there. Food was cheap, $1 gets you 30. The people would run up to us, and they would run up to us and they would say, are you crazy? And I said, what are you talking about? They go, you have no flak jacket, you have no bodyguards, you have no military escort. I said, if I had a military helmet on and a flak jacket, will you talk to me? They go, nope. A lot of content came back, and that's on the notowar.com website, NOTOWAR.com. And so we have, as a radio station, really had a lot of opportunity to go places as activists that we would be barred from. And a lot of times we would actually be with people who were commercial or corporate journalists, and they would be very, very upset. They didn't feel that we were the objective media, and we would just laugh. We go, you're right. I am not looking at this objectively, and I don't know how any human being can. And so we really, from a 233 computer, chugging out different packets of MP3s throughout the internet, we were able to travel the world to bring back some homegrown news.
So how many, so the basic blast furnace MO is to go into a place where there is no media, set up your live broadcast, and broadcast live out of there. So you've been to national security events all over the country, you've been to Baghdad. How many of these major world events have you think that you've covered in 10 years?
Well, again, we've covered 11 different uprisings against globalization. We even help people over the telephone to set up theirs in Genoa. We've been to the different uprisings in Canada, throughout the country, like New York and Boston, and Cincinnati with a big FTAA confrontation there. And so I don't know how many, but again, the places outside of the uprisings we've been to has been Baghdad and New Orleans. And now we're doing news coming out of West Virginia, the people resisting mountaintop removal before it became a hot issue, before a lot of people went down to Rock Creek. And when we first discovered that one of the founders of Earth First, Mike Rosal, and the gang had moved in, and that retired coal miners had given them 4 ruined cottages, one for geeks, one for college students, one for like sort of a show area or performance area, and one for aging hippies on SSI. Over 150 people arrested. And nowhere else that we know of, except maybe Australia, is there an ongoing nonviolent campaign. It's like, go to DC, get arrested. You know, maybe a year later, go to DC and get arrested. But to have consistent civil disobedience, to be caught up in the courts, to work with the legislature, to work with wind farms, to work with watching the rivers and the water quality, to confront the EPA. I mean, this has been every aspect of mountaintop removal has been covered by the people down in Ground Zero, and we were really excited that we were able to be there for the first of it.
Well, you've been active much longer than the 10 years that Blast Furnace has
very
been
much so.
in existence.
Very much so. But when you were sleeping at night as a little child in the 60s, and you heard that Paul was dead, and couldn't sleep all night, but you kept listening to the radio all night, you always dreamed of, you know, having a radio station and the power of people being able to hear of you, but the power of people being able to hear from you all over the world. We try to employ, in Abby Hoffman type fashion, humor as a way of communicating truth and entering into people's hearts. If you get people to laugh, you got them. This has been very important to us because we feel like that with a lot of the alternative, independent media that's out there, that they're trying to sound like NPR. Well, we already have an NPR. We don't need self-serious stations, you know, and especially if we're calling ourselves anarchists, we don't need to, form something that sounds like we're following different etiquette books of broadcasting.
Right.
And so I think that there's a lot of creative things we can do, and there's a lot of news out there that obviously is never going to be newsworthy to the corporate media, and that's what we need to go after. We need to interview people who are heroes in our communities. We need to, teach other nonprofit groups and other activist groups, how to do media so they could have a show of their own, even if they just do a half-an-hour show a week or every other week and place it on the internet and place it on Radio for All for people to rebroadcast. And I've met people from all over the world, all over the country, who have rebroadcasted our stuff and used our shows.
And
today's my birthday. I'm 58 years old.
You've got a rich history of activism, and
43 years.
You've been working with. I mean, have you been part of organizations?
No.
And how?
It's one of the time the anarchist said, "You're one of those individualist anarchists." I go, "You're catching on." I mean, I in the scriptures it says where 2 or 3 are gathered, there's trouble, and it just seems like that you have to take a few steps backwards, so when the whole shithouse comes down, that you're not caught underneath it. And so right now we're having some really bad post G20 fighting here in Pittsburgh, and if that determines our well-being or our emotional temperament or or landscape, then we're really in trouble. Obviously, NPR is cranking it out whether people are fighting in the coffee room or not, and so it's it's really important that that we keep our independence so that we could keep moving, because there's everything to stop us. There is romantic relationships and marriages. There's the economy. There's being imprisoned. I've been in and out of jail for, if you add it up, for almost 2.5 years. I've been arrested over 70 times. And there are worse addictions than civil disobedience. And
is that all for civil disobedience?
Yes, all for
nonviolent
nonviolent direct action, all of it. And there's no DUIs in there or getting busted for a bag of opium or something like that. It was all planned civil disobedience. It's very important not to be, as an anarchist, not to be part of a group, and a lot of times we would, in different protests that we put together, we would have a different name. Desert Flower, the Nonviolent Rapid Deployment Force, the Spiritual Affinity Group, SAG, I like that one, that's for you old baby boomers. On and on and on, just giving ourselves, different names, trying to keep things fresh and new, and it's exhausting because you still have to work with somebody, and you still have to work with people, but it's very important to keep our independence in the midst of doing independent media. I've worked with Democracy Now!, I've worked with Free Speech Radio, I've worked with independent media centers, and again, everybody gets along until they sit around in a room and have a meeting, and so I would rather upload my content to where they store their content and use their content than sit around in a room strategizing how we're going to do media. I don't think that's the hard part. The hard part is to be, as the song says, where the action is. And so as long as you could put your ear to the ground and hear what's happening in places like Rock Creek and be there, then I think that you have something to offer.
What are you going to do to celebrate your 10-year anniversary?
We're thinking of going to the mayor's office and asking him here in Pittsburgh how he likes Blast Furnace Radio. Well, we don't know what we're going to do. Maybe we'll bungee cord off the Mazeroski Bridge. There's an old saying going. He said, I'm not trying to change anything, I'm just trying to make sure that it doesn't change me. So what's on the horizon is trying to find new ways to communicate creatively the truth, and trying to be there in situations that other people cannot be in because of their restrictions, because of their poverty or responsibilities to families, and it's just important to keep going. We don't have the right or the privilege to give up.
Mobile broadcast news.
233 computer kicking out this music and content that I was a radio journalist, and so there has been a very rich history of traveling to 11 different cities throughout the world, helping with emergency broadcast systems, where you have a web radio station for just during the time of the globalization conference. We were able to come in, set it up, broadcast, and then tear it down just in and out like a guerrilla video gang. And when we had it for the first time in the year 2000, this is Vincent Eirene in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this coming month is the 10th anniversary of Blast Furnace Radio, the only internet radio station.
The only one. The only one ever?
The first. Yeah, Al Gore invented the internet, and I invented the... About 10 years ago, I heard from a friend of mine who knows a lot about computers, Lenny Flatley, that you could start a radio station on the internet. And of course, when we were kids, that's all we would dream about, having your own radio station. In Philadelphia at the RNC, you know, we had Jill of Biafra and different people come in, and it was a very rich mix of people that I have been in contact with ever since. At the time, radio stations did not have a internet radio station to complement their broadcast, and now everybody does. In fact, when Amy Goodman and them were locked out of their workspace before 9/11, we helped them with their web broadcasting. That has, and it took us a while to figure it out. It was a lot of DOS commands and all setting the INI and all this real complicated stuff, and it really didn't work because it was over a 56K modem. It didn't work till DSL came in, and we started a radio station in April 10 years ago in the year 2000. And when I told the media that in fact we were having starting an internet radio station, they came over for hours and hours and hours and asking questions and looking at it. And we had it in the basement with our famous Remco turntable, and they sat down there in spite of the kitty litter and learned about this new media.
Were they impressed?
They were, because it worked. I mean, it just, back then it seemed like magic that you could have a radio station over the internet, and now there's tens of thousands of stations.
Right.
And when you tell people that you have an internet radio station, they don't seem excited. They seem, you know, just blasé. But having a radio station, I didn't realize that by having this